So sometimes it's just like that, just being able to reach out and admit and ask, like,
Mhm.
where can I go? What can I do? This is hard. Like,
Mhm.
yes, parenting 101 is hard. Not never mind parenting when you've got a kid who is not following any book.
Welcome to the Carla Rand Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla, and this conversation it really stirred me up a lot. I was talking with Vander Haeghe. She's an incredible lady, by the way. I found out that we both grew up on farms, that we both loved horses, and so I'm sure if when we were younger, we would have been awesome friends. But even now, she's actually a Power Fitness member, so we've worked out together, we've chatted together, and just learning more about her was super fun in this interview, just getting to know her. But beyond that, just like the fact that she is helping kids with special needs, helping them at such a great level, and her heart for them is just incredible. So I think if you have a kid with special needs, or you know somebody, or you have friends, family, anybody that is struggling with maybe some learning issues that they are having maybe in school or homeschooled, whatever, this conversation is going to be really helpful for you. So I just appreciate Anna so much for taking the time to talk about this, and just the service that she's doing for these kids with special needs, because it's hard. As a parent, it's hard. It can be frustrating. It's a real struggle, and navigating the system is also a struggle. And Anna does such a good job of just breaking that down and helping us to understand how the system works and to help us just get those kids some help. So anyways, I know you'll love this, and let's get into the conversation. All right, well, I have Anna Vander Haeghe here, and she is the business owner of, what is your business name called, Anna? Can you give us the
It
name?
is the Edson LEAP Therapy and Resource Center, and it's just new. And my partner is Michelle Campbell, who's a local speech language pathologist. Her and I just opened our doors for business in September, actually, although we've lived here in the community for over 20 years.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's exciting.
Yeah, and I've known you for quite a while. You've been a Power Fitness member for quite a while. So you've been doing fitness classes with me, and we talk, and I remember talking like after class in the bathroom, we'd be just get going, and we'd be talking about, like how we can help our kids and what's the best way. So like I've seen your heart, and it's incredible like how you go the extra mile. So I definitely want to get into the whole thing of like children with special needs. I want to talk to you all about that. But before we get into that, Anna, let's talk about you. Okay, like let's just get to know you a little bit more. So first of all, welcome to the Carla Rand Show. I'm super happy to have you here, Anna. Thank you for being here.
I'm so honored to be here and nervous about it, and but just really excited. So thank you so much, Carla, for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so happy to have you on here. Honestly, you have so much to offer, Anna. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about your kind of your growing up years, your family life. Just give us a little bit of context to who Anna Vander Haeghe is.
Okay, well, so I grew up on Vancouver Island, and moved to Alberta for university. So for my first 18 years or so, I lived on Vancouver Island, and I was really lucky and blessed to grow up on a farm. And we were a fruit and vegetable farm. And so my parents farmed for 30 years, and we grew fruit and vegetables, and we had a large retail market. And that's the environment I grew up in, very kind of, I guess, just down to earth and hard worker parents. And yeah, they were just amazing role models for me and my brother. And so, yeah, I was very fortunate. We had really close knit, small community that we lived in. Two other families lived in the kind of the area that we lived in as well, and the large property. And so yeah, it was very special, kind of unique situation that I grew up in. And so yeah, very very blessed that way.
Mm-hmm.
um my passions when I was young, I was all into animals, horses, oh, anything horses. I would have like, that was my dream. I wanted to live, breathe, and work horses. I actually went down to California. All my extended family's all in the States, and went down to California on one of our trips when I was younger. And we checked out a place there that offered a degree program that you could learn business management and equine studies. And also you could become, you'd have enough training and horse management and stuff, so you could be like a trainer afterwards. but like the employment rate afterwards was like 20% or something like that. And I was like, no, my dream of working with horses is gone,
Well, that's funny.
And I was like,
If we would have grown up together, we might have been best friends because I was the same. Like I grew up on not a vegetable farm, like it was more of a cattle farm, but I loved horses. Like my dresser was full of horse pictures, posters all over calendars of horses. Like yeah, totally.
yeah, yeah, that was me. I had all my horse stuff, and I had a horse since I was I believe I was probably 8 or 9 when I got my first pony.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I mean horses, like when I met my husband now, we dated for 6 years, and I said, okay, just so you know, like horses come with me. So like if you can't handle that, you're gonna get a horse. So anyway, but yeah, so that was my first love. And then once I realized that kind of wasn't what I was gonna go into, and then I kind of decided to look into other areas and what other things could I do. I love sports, I love being active and all of that kind of stuff too. And so anyway, I ended up figuring out that I really thought that occupational therapy looked really interesting and challenging and different and not so prescribed as say physical therapy was at the time. And so yeah, so that was what led me to come out to Alberta and go to the rehab med program at the U of A, because that was really well known for being a really good program at that time. So yeah.
Cool. So that's what brought you out here. Um, so why? How did your programs go? And then what was your first job?
Oh, good question. So, huh, well, at that time, because I'm dating myself now, it was before masters were required. Nowadays, you need to have a degree and then you can get in, and it's a master's program. But at that time, it was survival of the highest GPA possible to get into the program. So on my third year attempt to get into that program, I had an 8.3 average out of 9 at the U of A, because I had to get like the highest ridiculous marks possible. I finally got in. And so my first years of university were studying my butt off, not partying, so I could get into that program. And so, yeah, once I got into the program, it was a 3-year program. And I did my practicums partly in the US and partly in Canada. I did extra practicums just because I was keen to do that and learn as much as I can, and take specific areas of my training that I could. And then I was offered my very first job in Whitecourt, Alberta. Actually, before I graduated, I had an interview, and 4 months before I graduated, and then I was doing 2 more practicums in the US. And so they interviewed me before, and they said, oh, we are starting an OT program in Whitecourt. You would be perfect. My boyfriend, who's my husband now at the time, had just got a job there in Whitecourt. And so I was pretty exciting, because I was like, woohoo, I'm going to have a job where my boyfriend is. And it's an OT job, not at all like completely oblivious that it was like I was going to be the first OT ever in Whitecourt. That was didn't even come into my thought pattern at that time. So
And how did
yeah.
okay, so you got that job and you've been working then as an OT ever since. So how many years?
Yes.
How
Yeah.
many years have you been working as an OT? Do you mind me
So
asking?
in 98, I graduated. So
Okay.
22 years, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So through that whole
Yeah.
process, I want you to give us like because a lot of people have special needs kids or they have a relative or a friend, they have somebody that has some sort of special needs kids. So what would you say or diverse learners? We talked before I hit record that like you like to call them more diverse learners. Why do you like to call them more that term versus special needs? Just give us a little bit of context there.
Well, I believe that diverse learners, I feel, is more inclusive to a larger, broader group of people. Um, a lot of people think of special needs as the visible special needs kids that you can identify from, maybe that they move their bodies differently than us, or use equipment to move around, or may not communicate in a verbal way with us. Um, and they might, it's something about them that it just obviously kind of points out they might have special needs.
Hmm.
But there's so many invisible difficulties and challenges that people and children have that are you wouldn't know by that outward appearance,
Hmm.
and but they may have differences in learning and that diversity of learning needs. So they may need to learn in a very different way or in a different rate than their peers. And I feel that that kind of diverse learners is more encompassing of those kids as well, because I work with those kids and families as well, not just the ones who, use the wheelchair or need help with their physical skills and such. So,
So
yeah.
give me some examples of the type of diverse learners and that you would work with that like we're talking like dyslexia here, we're talking ADHD, like what types of I guess how would you define that, I guess?
Yeah, so I work with kids anywhere from children who have an autism diagnosis or who have ADHD, who might have cerebral palsy or a real rare genetic syndrome, to anything that someone might just have challenges with sensory processing and they really struggle with attention and focus.
Mhm.
So yeah, like a huge, like pretty much anything and everything in the sense of any differences in learning, be it learning motor skills, learning how to look after themselves, or learning, how to learn, right?
Mhm.
So any of those challenges. And, it's actually neat that you asked that question because when I graduated and you're immersed in this like rehab medicine group of people and everyone knows what an OT does and everyone knows what speech does because you're in this little like bubble. And then you go out of this bubble and everyone's like, you're OT, what's OT overtime? And I'm like, no, I'm an occupational therapist. And then they're like, you work with kids, like what job are you training them for? I mean, that's
Mhm.
like the traditional answer. And I'm just like, no, that's not, no, stop it. So, and so, I spend a lot of my time just educating people of like what occupational therapy is. And my husband, laughs because when I worked for many years with Alberta Health Services, he's like, I can never tell people what you do because I did so many different things as an OT. And now that I just work in pediatrics, he's like, oh, thank goodness, it's so much easier for me to explain what you do. So, but yeah, I
That's
mean, because I mean, it is kind of interesting because occupational therapy kind of developed after World War I when there's all these soldiers coming back from the war with injuries and disabilities now because of the war, either mental health injuries or physical injuries or blindness, things like that, and they needed to go back into society and look after themselves and contribute and be happy and healthy. And so that's what occupational therapy did started as how can we provide therapy for your occupations, and your occupations are anything that you keep yourself busy.
mm,
So, what keeps a mom busy is different than what keeps a child busy, and what's different than keeps a working parent busy, right? So,
mhm,
we have different roles that we do to keep our occupations that we do during the day. And a child's occupation is basically to be able to learn, right? I mean, that's like really obviously really important. Be able to play. Kids need to learn how to like they need to be able to play because that's how they learn. And they need to learn how to gain independence. Like these three skills is basically a child's occupations. So if
mhm.
there's any difficulties with learning independence or learning to learn or playing, that's kind of where occupational therapists come in and they can help
Mhm.
support these kids and families.
So how best can we do that? Like, what's the best way in your experience to do that? Because you didn't start your business just because you wanted to start a business. You started it because you saw a
Um,
need, right? You saw a need and you were like,
yeah.
I want to help these people. I'm seeing that there's basically like a hole here and I want to fill that hole for these kids. So, what is it that they need that you're delivering to them?
Yeah, so when I worked with Alberta Health Services for those years, as an occupational therapist, I kind of fit in these like little niche areas of need in our community in the
Mhm.
sense of, custom splinting for people with arm, injuries or hand injuries. being able to, assess for specialized wheelchairs and seatings for people who needed that. And then at the same time, I also helped with development in the sense of pediatrics with kids who were showing some delays in their development and supporting these kids and families. And with the caseload that I had and the position that was available here in our town, it really only afforded the ability for me to maybe see them once a month,
Mm.
these families and kids. And there's so much research and so much backing stuff to support that that's not adequate. Like, you need early intervention to support these children, and you need to be able to support these families to support these children. And I was like providing a band-aid service. I felt it was just so minimal of what I was doing. And it was like so disheartening because there was so much I knew I could do and I couldn't do because of time
Mm.
commitments and caseload. So yeah, that was a big decision for me, like almost 8 years ago now, to just say, just just provide that, focus on that for our community because it's such a huge gap. And the children who were eligible for special services at that time, through program unit funding, PUF or FSCD, were also only getting minimal services from people that would come from the city often. And they might come a couple times a year or 3 or 4 times a year. And
Mhm.
again, that's not therapy, that's not early intervention, that's not support that is of any sort that's going to do a difference for this kid and child and family in the long term.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's what I felt pretty passionate about, that I could help support that locally and provide that gap in service locally.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone who I think who has a kid that has special needs or has, as I'm more of a diverse learner, I think anyone can attest that, yeah, like we need more support here. And again, it's not just about the kid. Like they can go to school or they can go to their little meetings and meet with the OT or whatever, and that's fine. But like if you only do that once a month, I mean, that's like I don't know, like, that's like working out once a month, like, you're not gonna get
Yeah,
results over time, right? It's the same kind of thing, like, you need to have that support, and the parents need to know what's going on so they can continue to support their kid at home, so the kid's not getting one thing away and one thing at home, like, they need to have that, it has to be the same, right? You have to be saying the same thing to
yeah.
the kid. So, yeah, I'm really
Well,
glad you're doing
and
that.
yeah, and I'm glad that you said that because, initially, if someone had asked me, what do you do as an OT with kids, I would have given you that little description of the 3 areas of OT, of,
Mhm,
occupations in kids, and I support those occupations and development of those occupations. And I do. I mean, I absolutely, those are where my goal areas are when I still work with kids and stuff. But really, I feel that my most important role is helping the family learn what their children's strengths and challenges are, and then how do we meet those, how do we use those strength areas to build up those challenges, or how do we compensate for that, right? Because not
mhm,
everyone is going to be exactly the same. Not everyone needs to, be able to skate. Not everyone needs to be able to, like, there's just some skills that are not really that necessary in the long term. And so let's take their skills that they are good at and have that parent really understand what their skills are that are great, how to support their other areas of weakness, and also then how to advocate for their child, because they're going to be their child's biggest cheerleader forever. And if they don't have a really strong understanding of how to support their child, um, then they're going to feel like they're failing,
mhm. Yeah, and if you are
and it's
yeah,
just, it's awful, right? Like, I mean, it's hard enough raising kids who, are just developing. They just aren't developing. You're like, geez, kids just get these things. They just get it so quick. And it's hard enough parenting them, like you're
mhm.
second guessing yourself all the time. And, I have 2 kids, you have 5, right?
I have 6
So
actually, but yeah.
6, sorry,
Yeah.
6. I'm like, yeah, sorry, I can't even keep track because my mind just is blown. People more than 2 kids. I'm like, oh, I can't do it. But yeah, like, parenting your children, they all have unique personalities. They all um respond slightly differently to your parenting and your style and your partner's style. And then you throw on top of a child with different learning needs, and that's not following the traditional textbook or parent suggestions of what you should do, like it is so disheartening and so like it just shatters your confidence as a parent,
Mm.
it just like and and so for me, my role I feel is so important to build up their confidence and their skills, because they all that's all they want. They just want to be able to understand their child so that they can support their child, and obviously, love them. Obviously, they do.
Mhm.
So that's all they want.
Well, there's some basic things too, like, just but to talking to you and you'd be like, oh, if this kid is sensory or this kid has this issue or whatever. And when you understand that, it's like, oh, well, what do you recommend? Like, what do you normally do? Well, some kids respond really well to this, some kids respond. So you have three options or four options or whatever. So you go and you try the different options. You're like, oh, my kid responds to this. Yay. Like all of a sudden, like something that seemed so impossible, you were just like, what is the problem with this kid? Boom, you have a way to help them, to deal with them. And it's done, right? It's not a big deal. Like some kids respond to pressure. So you can just take their head, and hold it tight and put pressure like on their head and they calm down after having an absolute. But if you started yelling at them and go to your room, it would do nothing. You grab them, you hold them, you squeeze them, boom, they calm down. They practically go to sleep, right? It's like a little chick, when you put it, they just go to
Yeah.
sleep, right? So it's like, yeah, it's amazing. And I think that you can offer that to parents. I mean, I bet you must see a lot of parents just like, well, I know I've talked to parents that are just like, Anna's amazing. Like, I think the bond that a lot of these parents have with you because you're helping them at such a personal level with their children is absolutely incredible, right? So I think you're just like, yeah, people are just, they're so thankful for what you do to help them, right? And so that must be very rewarding for you because you probably really do feel like you're making a difference. Do you feel that way, Anna, or do you feel like sometimes like you're banging your head against a wall?
No, no, like I'm so fortunate, honestly, being in this community and having such amazing people that I've worked with and families. And like yesterday, I got a message from a family just, reiterating that same thought, and I'm just like, oh, and I'm like tearing up while I'm reading this message. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much, because
Yeah.
it does like I think of these kids and families, and I hope that I'm obviously helping them, and when they say that to me, that obviously like that is huge, right? It's
Hmm.
enormous. So and it's funny that you mentioned like like so 2 days ago, someone else was talking to me, or 3 days ago, and they're like, "Yeah, like that conversation we had, what you gave my daughter was just like that was so important." I'm like, "I think I talked to you guys twice. Like, I
Hmm.
think maybe." And she's like, "Yeah, but it made all the difference." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "I didn't know. Like, that's
Yeah.
crazy."
Yeah.
And so that is very rewarding because there's lots of things about not my job necessarily, but things like systems in general that are very discouraging. And so when I get the feedback and families are so open with that to me personally, then that really helps because there's a lot of the families and I work within so many systems that the systems sometimes don't like working together and don't communicate, and everything gets kind of siloed again. And that's is such a struggle. It's a struggle for me, a struggle for the families that I work with. And so that can be frustrating because that is what I'm also doing behind the scenes, is trying to work on breaking down those silos for our community and trying not to let those be barriers for families, with children. So
Hmm.
yeah, that is yeah, the positive feedback is definitely like yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, who doesn't want that, right? I mean, your oxytocin gets released, and endorphins and everything. So I'm like,
Yeah.
woohoo, happy hormones.
Oh, totally.
So,
Yeah, and I mean, like, and talking about that, and I'm just gonna say from my personal experience. So my personal experience, and I know that it's not unique. I know that it's basically everybody's experience because I've talked to a lot of people that have children with special needs or diverse learning needs or whatever you want to call it. And my experience was take them to the doctor and well, let's try this, let's try that. Oh, give it some time, take a Tylenol type of thing, go home. And so it's not working. The kid, it's getting worse. So you go back to okay, well, we'll refer them to this thing. And meanwhile, they're getting behind in school. They're, not getting along at home. Things are escalating for them. So that kid is under enormous stress during all this. So you finally get a referral to somebody. Then they look at them, then they make some recommendations. So then you go home and you try to do the recommendations, but it's still not working. So then you have to go to some other special place, like where there's some more specialists, whether it's like the autistic center at the Glenrose, or maybe they suspect ADHD, like whatever it is that they suspect. Now here's take this medication or do that. So you've got to try to figure out based on like very little knowledge what to do with this kid. And when it talks about medication, a lot of people don't want to medicate their kid, so they don't know what to do. So they try to not medicate their kid. Well, their kid keeps getting worse, right? So it's just like this long process, and nobody follows up with you, by the way. Nobody will come, "Oh,
Nope,
how did
nope.
that go?" Like, I'm just following up just to see that everything's okay. No, you don't get that. So basically, unless your kid is like, practically dying, they're not going to see, they're not going to get up to the real special specialist that can actually help them. So it's just this constant fight, fight, fight. And like you said, if you don't advocate for your kid, who will? And you really have to yeah, it's extremely frustrating. So from my situation, and I like I said, I've talked to many other people, it is extremely difficult. So I can only imagine you're not just dealing with one or two kids, you're dealing with a whole bunch of kids and trying to help the parent advocate for them and say, well, try this or go here, right? And I mean, like I personally, and you tell me what you think about this. This would be my thought. I feel like every kid, I feel like actually every person should have like their own sort of agent, someone who communicates with the doctor, with their physiotherapist, with their chiropractor, with their health, their health coach, with their nutritionist, whatever, right? And that they advocate for that person, and they know all the strings to pull. They know who to connect them with, like that. And I feel like maybe that's kind of what you do for these kids. You're maybe a little bit like an agent. I don't know. Would you describe yourself a little bit that way?
Well, it's funny that you said that too. And I keep saying it's funny that you said that, but because
Yeah.
seriously, like it's like, oh my goodness. So part of the reason why Michelle and I started this company, the LEAP Therapy and Resource Center in the fall, is because we wanted to actually like formalize and say, here's a place and a location that people can contact if they need some help navigating the systems right now. Because that is what I have done for the last 20 years in grocery stores, at,
Workout
gas
class.
stations, at the park,
Yeah.
on the sidewalk. Families will say, Anna, I heard you work with kids. Like, I'm having this struggle and blah, blah, blah. And I would direct them to where they need to go or the resources that I knew were in town or just gave them a pat on the back and say, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. You're doing awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, like that's where I feel like, I mean, I've been doing that silently, I guess, all the time. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, no, we need to like legitimize this, this is what we're like, this is what we do. This is what my life has been like for many, many years.
Mhm.
And to provide those families with a place to be able to ask those questions and hopefully get some direction. And, we are really trying in our community to try to figure out how we can fill some gaps in our community because there are multiple gaps right now, and what's that going to look like, and whose roles are what, in trying to support these families, because you're absolutely right in that the navigating the systems is ridiculously complicated. Like
Mhm.
it is so complicated. It's just a give up situation for many, many families. And that's for families who know that there's systems to navigate, and there's other families who don't even know that there's supports out there and that there's programs out there to actually help kids and them as parents
Mhm.
be able to manage and be successful. So yeah, there's lots of conversations being held in our community trying to figure out how we can support these families better in providing like a person to be more like that social piecework role, and yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm hoping that we can really, because it is a small community. We've all been in a lot of our positions for a long time in our community, so we do know what we have here and what's available and who's best at what. And so I feel optimistic that we can make this. We can figure it out. So
Mhm. Just to
yeah.
streamline it a little bit. Yeah, I felt like when with my kid, I just felt like a warrior. Like like I'd come out of battle, with all these scars, just trying to fight for my kid and trying to get them the help they need. And I just feel like it shouldn't be that hard. And I'm a fighter, right? Like I'm a fighter. So you think of somebody who's not a fighter, who's just like, oh, I guess they just aren't going to get help. well, I mean, that poor kid. Like it's about the kid's the one that suffers, right? Like the parents, they suffer too like crazy and so do the siblings and everything, but it's the kid who's trying to navigate life in a life that is not, it doesn't suit the way they think. It doesn't suit their learning needs. And so they're trying to get through it and they feel like a failure. They feel like there's something wrong with them. There's all kinds of problems that can happen with that kid with their mental health and stuff. They can go from just thinking,
Oh,
"Oh, this is tough," to being like, like really extremes, right? So it's like how can we help them? And I'm so glad what you're doing and really like I feel like I just want to support you because I think what you're doing is you're helping the parents, you're helping the siblings, you're helping that kid to not feel like a failure for the rest of their life. Like there is a way for you to learn. In fact, a lot of these kids, and you would probably attest to this, they have this special genius. Like they actually, so many of them are so special and unique, and they're wired that way for a special purpose. So when we don't help them find that purpose, like what a disservice that we're doing to our whole world, like our whole community, because these people can't shine. These kids aren't able to grow up and be supported in the way that they need, right? Like, so
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yes, so true. I mean, you've said it exactly how I feel so strongly about it because, how education is taught and learning is taught, it just doesn't fit the mold for a lot of our kids, right?
mm-hmm.
And so how do we increase that learning opportunities for them so that they're more successful, so that they're not depressed by grade two, and having mental health issues, exactly, because
Mm-hmm.
their anxiety is so absolutely sky high, because their needs, are not, their environment is not ideal for their learning needs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's really really, it's a huge area. And then it's been compounded with all the lockdown stop measures and the changes in how education has been provided in the last number of months, and even how it is provided right now in the schools is not a good combination for the majority of my families that I work with.
Yeah.
I would love to see a statistic right now, but I feel that there must be a very disproportionate percentage of kids who are homeschooling right now, with diverse learning needs. Like
Mm-hmm.
I am almost like every week I probably hear at least two more families that, oh, I'm homeschooling, didn't you know? And I'm like, what?
Uh,
And I know what I may have worked with them 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 8 years ago, and I'm like, no, another one that couldn't manage you know the environment of, not to do, some obviously to do with COVID, because their health risks may be increased, but the majority of them because of the change in the structure of the learning environment to meet the standards to follow kind of the HS guidelines and stuff like that. So it's really, really too bad. So
and I would say, I want your opinion on this. I would say some kids with diverse learning needs are actually better off homeschooling, but a lot of them aren't. Because if the parent doesn't understand exactly how to get through to that kid, and the parent is just doing what they know, or maybe what worked with them or worked with their other kids, and it's not working, well, now that kid's in an even worse situation potentially. But again, there probably would be some kids that actually would excel at home, like they just need to be home because of all the regulations and stuff. It's just overwhelming for them. Would you agree? Yeah.
yeah, no, there's definitely a portion that definitely thrive in the home learning environment because they can modify it to meet their learning needs, right?
Yeah.
Um, but then their access to services, if they're homeschool, is almost nil.
Mhm.
So does that mean, is that equitable then? Like, so if it's the family's choice to homeschool them, that's great. That's the family's choice. But then they also should have received services available to that family and child to support their learning needs at home.
Oh, so they don't
Then that
have
would
that if they're
be
homeschooled. I didn't realize that. So if they're homeschooled, they don't get extra supports for their learning. Oh, okay.
pretty much, that's been my understanding from
Wow.
what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then and the other point on that too is like, I mean, I think how many memes were out there during the lockdown about I am not a teacher, like this is, like parent, 0, child 100, points. Like no, teaching is not my thing for my own children. Maybe I can teach other kids, but not my own children. And so, you're adding that layer of stress and responsibility onto parents who already have a child with special needs and different learning needs, and then you're expecting them to be able to step up and do all that stuff too. And then when is like the balance between parenting and just enjoying your child and then trying to educate your child at home, like that stress can be tremendous.
Mhm.
Just parenting a child who has special needs is like, it's exhausting, right? I mean, I don't have that. I'm not in that position. I've only heard this from the thousands of families that I've worked with over the years,
Yeah.
right? There's not a single family that hasn't told me that. Not a
Hmm.
single one that
Yeah.
hasn't said it isn't exhausting, and that's why there's programs like FCS, FSCD, Family Support for Children with Disabilities, that helps provide respite to families who have children with special needs,
Hmm.
because these families need the ability to have breaks and respite time for themselves to recharge as a couple or recharge as a human again,
Yeah.
as a person.
Yeah.
And because the advocation, constantly the challenging behaviors, the keeping you on your toes, the sleepless nights, the
Hmm.
anxiety as a parent, like all of that doesn't go away. It's
Hmm.
not a phase.
Yeah.
It doesn't just like finish when they finish being a teenager.
Yeah.
It's forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a rough go. And I will say too, like, I am a teacher, Anna, and I think you know that I have my teaching degree. So I am a teacher. When I had all 6 of my kids home, and I was supposed to teach them, and not the way I wanted to teach them, but to the parameters of, like, the school system with everybody on a different device. I seriously would, like, go batty. Like, my mental health through this has been, like, I'll be honest, it's been not good. And I just about was like, yeah, I would actually go for long, like, ridiculously long walks just to get out of it because I could not deal with it, and I'm like I said, I'm kind of a fighter, I usually can figure things out, I can make things happen, but I was, like, getting very, just, like, overwhelmed with it, and I mean, yeah, I have 6 kids, so that's a whole different story, but you think of, even if you have 2 or 3 or, and you got special needs in that mix and all that, I mean, that is a rough place. So, yeah, it's been I think it's been tough for everybody with all the COVID stuff, but especially those with, kids with any kind of learning needs, like, man, that's so tough. So what are you doing right now? Like, what does your business do right now? What are you doing the most, I guess, to support? Like, so say if somebody right now, they have a kid with special needs, they're struggling, like probably 90% of them are. Um, what services could you offer them? What would you tell them that would be a good starting place if they're just really kind of like a little bit lost or frustrated with the system or lack of system or whatever?
I think my my advice to parents, and it's hard, you know, I'm very much like a go-getter, right? Like
Hmm.
I just do something and figure it out as I'm doing it, I guess, like,
Yeah,
oh,
me too.
let's
Me
just do
too.
this,
Yeah.
you know? And I mean, I think part of that is because when my first job being in White Court, I was the first OT there. There was no book for me. There was no roles for me to follow. There was nothing. And I was there for 2 years, and then we moved to Edson, and the exact same thing happened in Edson. I was no OT before, and a new position. And again, I had to kind of create a role for me in the community and figure out how I can best support the community that I'm now living in. And so I guess that's the same kind of thing I have with just jumping into things. That has taught me that that is not how the majority of people think and act. And so I may just go out and like literally phone colleagues up in the States because they specialize in something and I want to know how that is and I want more training in it. And I have no problems with that. But I realize that's not what people are often comfortable doing.
Yeah.
So my number one thing is to reach out and ask for help, and not have that as a reflection of you failing as a parent at all.
Mhm.
Because there are people that's all we do is try to help families navigate systems or find supports for their kids and figure out how we can support their children. Like that's all I do. That's all my job is as a
Mhm.
pediatric OT. And so to expect that a parent should just know those things without like reaching out is silly, right? Is foolish to
Mhm.
think that as a parent. And so if they can somehow in their head realize that reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength, that
Mhm.
they're willing to ask for to someone else to help guide them or direct them in the right way or run an idea by them. I
Mhm.
have parents just call me sometimes and just say, I was thinking of, such and such, and do you think this might be a good idea? I'm like, oh man, you're good. You're
Yeah.
awesome. Right on. Or, hey, did you think of this as well? And they're like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? I'm like, oh, you would have come to it eventually,
Mhm.
So, and they're off again.
Yeah.
So sometimes just like that, just being able to reach out and, and admit and ask, like,
Mhm.
where can I go? What can I do? This is hard. Like,
Mhm.
yes, parenting 101 is hard. Never mind parenting when you've got a kid who is not following any book that you
Mhm.
can't figure out. Like that is we weren't like that is not what we were that was not what we signed up for.
That's
Like
right,
this is
yeah.
not what we expected.
I
This
know.
is hard stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's like number one is just to reach out. I guess what I what I'm doing the most of, I'm doing a so I support families who have children already who have supports in place, like funding in place. So families who have FSCD, Family Supports for Children with Disabilities, that supports children and families from birth to 18 years old.
Mhm.
If you have a child with a diagnosis or you're in the process of getting a diagnosis for your child and you're really struggling at home parenting your child, that is a huge resource for families in Alberta. And so lots of times phone calls from people, I'll direct them to that online application form and see if they can get some supports in place that way and some funding that would help fund so either parenting programs or specifically occupational therapy or behavior supports or things like that. So, or speech language, right? So,
Mhm.
so that's a big support area that will direct people towards. I also support the children who are PUF funded, program unit funded, and who are attending the Edson Friendship Center private school program here this year. In the past, I've supported the programs throughout the whole area in our region, but this year I'm only supporting the Edson Friendship Center private school and also YKCS's programs there as well.
Okay.
And so I do support those kids and families as well. And then at our center, at the LEAP Center, I also provide either private therapy for families who want private therapy. They might be able to support that either through benefits or out of pocket. And so that, um, and then we are also offering groups like literacy groups and social groups and things like that in this fall or in the after Christmas. I'm hoping to run some motor groups, and
Oh.
so that kind of stuff in the upcoming time. And
Mhm.
then also the center is providing a lot of respite groups.
Mhm.
So we kind of provide small groups again with all the COVID restrictions, and we provide really small groups with staff who are trained working with kids with special needs and diverse learners. And we provide a safe place for them to come. And they have like an awesome time. We usually do half day programs on non student days. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's been really popular.
Mhm.
And it's just a parent again yesterday said to me, it's the one place I can drop my child off and I have like no worries. Like
Mhm.
not a worry when I walk away. I don't worry about a thing. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like that's
Yeah.
what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
That's what we want to be able to provide.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's wonderful. And I really think like for anybody who doesn't know you and your team, like you have incredible people that are working with you too, which is amazing. So I know for me too, like I'm at the phase now where my kids are like they're getting older, but like, to have a resource like that when your kids are younger. What age group do you work with specifically, Anna? Just so people know.
So I actually work with like the full all the way up to age 18.
Okay.
The majority of my kids that I'm working with right now are going to be the younger kids, just because that's where it tends to have more of the funding in place, especially like Puff is only for 3 to 6 year olds. So,
Mm,
I have a large portion of my group of kids that way. But then I have a number that are, up to age 12 right now that I'm working with is pretty, 3 to 12 is my biggest range of kids that I work with right now. But
okay.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing, Anna. It really does mean a lot. It means a lot to me. And I know it means so much to those families who are struggling. And I mean, these kids, there's no reason for them to struggle. There's so many supports for them. There's no reason for them to struggle the way that they're struggling. And it hurts my heart. And I imagine it must hurt yours heart so much because you see even more of it. You must just want to be like, because they don't need to struggle to this degree. Right. So if you're at home and you've got a kid with special needs, reach out to Anna because like, they don't need to struggle to the capacity they are, even if it's just a matter of having a chat with Anna, maybe she can give some advice. Maybe it's just like maybe Anna can just send you to some resource that would be helpful, a book, whatever, right? Like, don't try to do it on your own. I mean, parenting is tough enough. Like you said, right? Like reading parenting books and stuff. Those parenting books do not have, here's how you parent a special needs kid, like it's a completely different ball of wax. And
No,
like, it's totally different. So you have to have those supports.
yeah.
So where do people go to find you if they want to reach out to you, Anna?
So they can go on the website. So we have Edson LEAP sorry, end of our interview here. Edson LEAP Therapy and Resource Center. But if you type in Edson LEAP LEAP Center, it'll pop up right away. And I'm also it also has a Facebook page as well, so you can check us there and like us. And I also have a really active OT persona on Facebook as well. And so it's Anna V for Vander Haeghe OT, Anna V OT. And I try to post things quite frequently on that page, tips that are practical for families and other therapists out there. So yeah.
Yeah.
So you can reach us in those ways.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you for being here. And especially thank you for what you're doing in our community. I appreciate you. I'd like to be able to clone you and have about 50 of you, right? Like, like let's just go help these kids. Like they don't need to be struggling so much. So yeah. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And thank you again for being on the Carla Rand Show. Really appreciate it, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.